Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Islamic Awakening with me, Raza Kazim. Some people argue that ethics is an ever-changing and complex area and that Islamic ethics is not any different. Others have a more fixed view about Islamic ethics. But the world is far more complex today, so how can the complex realities of the current situation not impact on the principles within which Islamic ethics operates? Must Islam not conform its principles to reflect the realities of today, to provide answers that are relevant for today's world?
The Holy Book of Islam, the Holy Quran, calls Muslims to virtuous deeds as a guiding principle of Islamic behavior. Primary characters Muslims are to abide by include piety, humility, and a profound sense of accountability to God. A Muslim is expected to be humble before God and with other people. Islam also commands Muslims to exercise control of their passions and desires. Morality is seen as a source of strength in Islam, and immorality the main cause of decline. This is why Islam places equal emphasis on both individuals' ethics as well as society's morality.
The basic morals of any faith that you follow, good people are everywhere, and that's exactly what Islam teaches.
Unity in the community, peace in the community, and tolerance in the community. This is a standard for Islam and needs to be be a bit more active within the Islamic community.
Strive and be like the Prophet, peace be upon him, and follow his teachings. And Islam teaches us to be like the best of human beings as much as possible. Each action that we do, we will get the best of this world, and if we don't get anything in this world, we'll get the reward in the hereafter.
To address these and other issues, we have our esteemed guest, Professor Tariq Ramadan. Welcome to the program.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam. If I can start off by asking, just what is ethics? What does it mean?
First, when we speak in English, we already have a problem defining the concept, and then we have to translate this into Arabic, for example, because when we are dealing with the Quran, this is where we will get our terminology. Ethics, some were asking what is the difference between ethics and morality, and some were saying morality is coming from the religious tradition, ethics is coming from rationality and common rationality. As to define what is good and what is evil, what is good and what is bad. So what we have when it comes to ethics is the very essence of how do we define what is good. Is it coming from the religious text, or is it coming from the common rationality? And some were saying ethics is in Greek what morality is in Latin. But there is a difference as to the source, mainly in the philosophical tradition. From an Islamic viewpoint, what we have is that we have one word, al-akhlaq. And al-akhlaq in Islam is not exactly ethics, but it covers three things that are very important. The first is very much about the principles, the sources. How do we define from an Islamic viewpoint what is good and what is bad? And we have many opinions and tensions and disputes among the scholars about, is it only coming from the scriptural sources, is it coming from the rationality, it's coming from both. We have this in the Sunni tradition and we have it in the Shia tradition. This is one thing which is important. The second thing which is also important, that we are dealing with al-akhlaq, it's coming from the Quran. وَإِنَّكَ عَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. You are indeed, you have been created with a good character. So it's the good behavior, it's the way we behave. This is ethics, the way we are dealing with people. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. I was sent to achieve, to complete the good manners. So it's something which is important, and by saying this, he's also saying that something was there before he himself came with the last message. And there are two other things that we can add to this. The third one is about the codes of ethics. In every profession, when you are a medical doctor, a physician, or a teacher, or whatever, you have a code of ethics, meaning what are the rules and the ethical rules that you should implement when it comes to your profession in your field. And the last discussion that we have with ethics has to do with the goals. What are the objectives of what you are dealing with? So for example, ethical goals should be, and this is what we have in Islam, Allahumma nas'aluka ilman nafi'a. Oh God, we are asking you useful knowledge, meaning knowledge is good, but it has to be useful. It has to be useful for the good of humanity and not to be used against humanity. So these are four fields when it comes to Islam, and it's mirroring the Western discussion.
Okay. Within the context of Islamic ethics, is this discussed within the Quran, and how is it discussed in the Quran?
Yes, in the Quran, it's discussed in a way where, first, everything which is said about our model, the Prophet, peace be upon him, is about his character, his good manner, his morality. The rules in the Quran and all the verses that are dealing with the rules, ayat al-ahkam, are 1%, 2%, 3%, and at the highest level, when the scholars were talking, they say it might reach 10%, but these are different views that we have. But it means that the great majority of the message is based on morality, is what is good and what is bad, and even calling the people to follow al-ma'ruf. Al-ma'ruf is known by the people as being good, so it's about morality. And al-munkar is known as being bad. And we, as a community, we are the best community in so far as we command what is good and we resist what is bad. And this is what we have. كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر. So this is the very meaning of you are the best community, in as much as you are promoting what is right and you are resisting you are promoting what is good, and you are resisting what is bad, and you believe in God. So our presence on earth is based on a moral presence, an ethical presence that we have in the Quran, and this is the way. Following the Prophet, peace be upon him, we are a mercy to the world. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. Your mercy to the world is because you promote what is right and you resist what is bad wherever you are.
That's useful, and one of the things I want to go on to is look at some of the issues that are actually thrown up in the current context, and one of them is euthanasia, or assisted dying. What is there an Islamic response, or are there a multitude of Islamic responses to, let's say, that, what the current kind of discussion has been in some of the mainstream?
Yes, and of course, the Muslims, in many fields, and especially when it came to medical sciences, the scholars were at the forefront of responding to this. But what we need to understand, and this is also something which is very important, we come with the Quran and the Sunnah, we come with the scriptural sources, and we have ahkam, rules that are helping us to understand what is good and what is bad. Meaning that this silence means that we are dealing with a world which is changing, technology, science, knowledge. It's a complexified reality, and we have to make our mind. So we come back to the scriptural sources, we try to understand the principles and the ethical direction, which is maslaha. Maslaha means the public interest, but it's an ethical public interest, an ethical individual interest, and we try to find answer for our time. So today, with the technology that we have, we can decide in which way we are going to intervene in the people's life, for example. And it could be that sometimes today we want to go as far as to, because somebody is sick and there is a final stage that we want to help him or her to end his or her life. Islam on this, it's coming with a framework within which you will find many opinions coming from scholars. So there is one direction, and on one thing there is a consensus. You can't decide for yourself to stop your life. So this is a suicide, so you can't do that. Now, if, for example, you are sick and there is a medical doctor saying, okay, it's the final stage. There is no way of coming back. It's irreversible. So it's the final stage. And you are suffering. Can the physician give morphine, in fact, to lower your suffering, knowing that this could have an impact on the time and shorten the time, knowing that you are going to die anyway. The medical doctor is saying there is no way for him or her to come back. But what we are doing is, by acting or behaving or acting on the suffering, we are shortening the life. This is an indirect euthanasia. I'd say this is something which is possible. It's not direct. It's not an active euthanasia. It's a passive euthanasia, because he's going or she's going to die anyway. So what we are doing is we are lowering. So you have opinions here, and this is, by the way, the majority of the opinion among the Muslim scholars, but you have multiple answers on this.
Some might respond to this and say, as you've done an indirect where you're giving more morphine to ease the pain, that's different. The intention is different, the purpose is different. The outcome may well be that as a result of decreasing the pain, that the speed with which the person proceeds to death is increased. However, that's not the purpose. The idea of euthanasia is that you actually actively assist.
No, we have to be very, I understand what you mean.
And this is different.
No, but this is not euthanasia. There are 9 types of euthanasia. One of them is, at the starting point, there I have 2. Active, passive. Active direct, active indirect. Passive direct, passive indirect. What is active? It's outside Islam. So we are not, the consensus among the scholars is that you cannot end a life when this life is not at the final stage and you are shortening. But it's still euthanasia when it comes to dealing with suffering. For example, in some European countries, it's illegal just to give morphine to shorten or to lessen the suffering and to shorten the life. It's illegal. From an Islamic perspective, this is indirect, because he or she is going to die anyway. So for us, we are not celebrating suffering as something which is good. We are dealing with dignity, وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ, in the way you are leaving this life, and we are able and we can go in that direction. So I would say that this is very important for the Muslims to understand. Be careful when we speak about euthanasia. We are not only speaking about active euthanasia, we are talking about passive euthanasia, and this is where we need the physicians to come and to tell us all the typology, to know with what we agree, because this is something which is very important. It's the palliative cure that we have and going along the people. It's something which is very important. So I think that we have to be precise on this.
Talking about precision, one of the things that strikes me is that when we talk about this particular issue, is the word, the language, the semantics, euthanasia, when you qualify it by saying active or passive. Are we in danger of normalizing this and saying that this is something that is okay? Because a lot of the time in the common mainstream, the understanding is not of the passive euthanasia, but it's actually of the active euthanasia, which people are really, there is a moral resistance to about where we're going in terms of society.
No, I think that terminology it should not come from the average understanding or the perceptions. It should come from the specialists, from the physicians, and we have to be very, very strict on this. We have a category, and we need to understand what we are talking about. It's exactly the same with cloning, because you have to differentiate between cloning, the therapeutic cloning, from cloning of human beings and animals. It's not the same. So there is something which has. So this categorization is not coming from the average and the perception. We should not let the perception drive the Islamic answer. First, it has to come from informed people when it comes to the medical field, and at the same time from scholars.
You've raised the issue of cloning, and I want to come back to that in a second. We do like to keep this show as interactive as possible and really value your opinion. Here is what you sent us this week.
This week we asked, what are some of the fundamental characteristics a Muslim must possess? Miriam from South Africa said, I think the most important characteristic of a Muslim is upholding justice and rejecting all sorts of oppression. This will ensure a just world. And Zara from Scotland said, I think Islam places most emphasis on humanity. A good Muslim is a good human being. And that's all the comments we have for this week. If you'd like to have your comments featured in the show, be sure to follow us on Facebook or join us on Twitter.
You were talking earlier about this, the issue of cloning and how that works. I mean, we've had cloning of a sheep here in the UK. We've had it in Iran, and you know, how does cloning, first of all, what is cloning, and how, if you can explain that briefly?
No, cloning, it's a different level because it works with the cells and stem cells. It's also something which so we have different levels: cells, stem cells, and what we achieved in Europe and in Iran and in, I think, 2 other countries, yes, is to have a sheep and then to be able to make it. From an Islamic perspective, the great majority of the scholars, and this is where, once again, exactly the same situation, when we have a position of principle, cloning, so to duplicate the creation with human beings, is something that the consensus is that we should not go that way. We should not go that way because this is what the Quran is referring to, changing God's creation. So we have to stop. Now, when it comes to cloning and with the cells and the stem cells, some scholars are saying, as long as it's for therapeutic reasons, that you are helping somebody to cure, and it's done with the tissues and not with the beings and the people or the beings that are alive, you can go for this. The great majority of the scholars will not go as far as accepting even with this with animals, while it was done in Iran, and some are saying for this what we are trying is that we are using this to help human beings, and in the hierarchy of the creation, سَخَّرَ لَكُم مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ, so everything is at your disposal to protect human life. So this is the perception that scholars, the Shia scholars, which they are not agreeing with the great majority of the Sunni scholars here, but still with the Sunni scholars we have disagreements. So we can see here that this ethical discussions on new realities, it's complexified. We have technologies now and means to do things that were not thinkable in the past, and we need to have an ongoing process to say, okay, in the light of the Islamic principles, what are the answers? And you can see that we have many.
And one of the things with this, the stem cells, and when you say therapeutic and helping and so on, what does that precisely entail? So how does this, what is the problem with it that some of the scholars perhaps see with regards to this? You know, what are the ethical issues or that they're tussling with that from the Quranic or the Islamic point of view creates problems from progressing on this front?
Yes, that's exactly a very important point, which is what I was defining at the beginning of our discussion. What is your objective? What do you want to achieve? Are you doing this in order to serve humanity, or are you doing this to get more money, to get, you know, power over people? Because as soon as you enter into the genetics, you can control, you can play with the creation. So what is your intention? For example, when you are dealing with, you know, plants and agriculture, and you are using the technology to multiply your production with the intent to make more money and not to distribute what you have with more justice, the intention is distorted. So the starting point is, the ethical question is, what is your intention? What do you want to achieve?
People might argue, actually my intention is good. Yes, there will be those potential outcomes from that intention, but actually the primary purpose is to serve humanity. But can we not do that, serve humanity by doing this, but at the same time put controls, checks and balances? Or is the argument that I'm framing a slippery slope?
It is, and you know at the moment you are asking this question that it is, but the point is here that in ethical terms, all this discussion is all about balancing the advantage and the disadvantage. And this is where the scholars, and this is where, you know, the ulama, the shuyukh, the maulana, the mullah, the ayatollah that know about the scriptural sources, they should have with them in these issues when it comes to ethics, when it comes to economy, when it comes to politics, when it comes to culture, when it comes to medical sciences. They need to have scholars of the context, scholars that are in the field. At the end, the ethical choice is all based on assessing the situation. There are things that are good, but the consequences are so bad or so potentially bad that you better stop from doing them.
One of the things that comes to my mind as you were talking was this idea that sometimes the transgression, or as from the Islamic perspective that might be perceived to be there, might actually be done. There isn't that kind of, while there's an ethical debate going on, there are some countries which will say, well, forget it, it works for us, we're going to go ahead and do this and apply this to human beings and so on. How is the Islamic response then going to deal with the consequences that maybe in the Islamic framework was the reason why it was that research or that idea being moved forward was repressed or stopped, but here it hasn't been. So how do you deal with the consequences of that? Is there an Islamic response to that?
Always, of course. It's very pragmatic. You know, fiqh, Islamic law and jurisprudence is always dealing with it. And what we understand is that it's a preemptive way, to the point that some scholars were always saying haram, 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 it's unlawful in order to prevent anything to happen. But as we know today, science and economy with science are so powerful that almost everything which is possible becomes permissible. And this is where we are lost in this. So we have to come with a very clear framework. And I would say it's not because it's permissible in the West or because of, you know, the world culture or the imposition of the scientific mind that we have to accept that. We need to still come and have some limits. And there are scholars saying, okay, look, we are going too far with cloning. We are going too far with, for example, organ donations, at the point where something which was lawful for the scholars ended up being something that we are trading with. So we put money, and by doing this, as a consequence, you are nurturing the rich people buying from the poor people, and it becomes a trade which is unacceptable. So even if some scholars said, oh, when somebody is poor, he could be able to be involved. So we have to assess the consequences, and the ethical question is all about balancing, assessing, and trying to find the wisest way to deal with the issues.
There are other questions to ask, but perhaps this program has raised more questions than it has answered. What is clear is that regardless of the issue, there are Islamic viewpoints that scholars of Islam have to grapple with and provide answers for. The Islamic perspective of being there as a complete code of life is not going away anytime soon, but the need to engage with issues is significant. The time is up for today's topic. I would like to thank Professor Tariq Ramadan for his views on this topic, and of course all of you at home for watching. Goodbye until the next time and another edition of Islamic Awakening.